Thank you very much. So what we do is we go through a group of species and assess them. So for example, we could look at all the birds, and we look at all the birds of the world. It's about 12,000 species, I think. And then we go through by each species and we collect the data, the information on that species. How many are they? Where do they occur? What are the threats? What are the conservation actions? And we feed that data into what we call the red list criteria. And the red list criteria are really just a set of rules. And you feed them into the rules, and that tells you how threatened a species is. Is it critically endangered? Is it endangered? Is it vulnerable? Or is it not threatened at all, which we call least concern? So if we do that, for example, with all 12,000 bird species, we will find out the number of threatened bird species. Say it's 2,000 out of 12,000. That number is a guess, but that is how we do it. It's very much based on the data, and the data go into the criteria or the rules. And so I could give you a few examples. For instance, a very well-known species, the tiger, not a bird, of course, now, the tiger, iconic species of Asia. And it occurs in quite a lot of countries, but has become quite rare. We feed the data in, and what we discover is that the tiger is endangered. I'll give you another example. There is a toad, an amphibian that occurs on the mountain called Gede Pangrango on Java in Indonesia, only on this mountain. And if we feed the data on this toad into the system, it comes out on the IUCN Red List as critically endangered. And my final example is a bird that was famous in Japan, the Crested Ibis, Nipponia nippon, the Crested Ibis. It went extinct in Japan. It was survived in China, and it was critically endangered for a long time. But the conservation efforts have led to a slow recovery, and now it's moved from critically endangered to endangered. It is less threatened, and they're starting a reintroduction project in Japan. So these are just examples of how you use the data to find out which species are threatened, and then we add up the number of threatened species. Yeah, so there are two questions here. So there are a very large number of actions that are being taken around the world to save threatened species. So probably the commonest action is to protect the habitat of threatened species. So a lot of species are disappearing because their habitat is removed. And so measures get taken to protect the habitat of the species, often by creating nature reserves or national parks or defined areas like this. Or sometimes it's community action that takes place to preserve the habitat of threatened species. Another thing that is done for many threatened species is to reduce the level of hunting or fishing if there's too much hunting or fishing. So then government legislation to prevent hunting of a very threatened species, or to restrict the amount of fishing of a threatened species, or to bring in measures to make sure that a threatened species is not accidentally caught in a fishery that targets another species, things like this. Then there are a whole set of actions taken to remove damaging species. So some species, we call them invasive species, they get outside their natural ranges, and when they do, they can become very damaging to native species, for example, on islands especially. And so quite a lot of action is taken to remove, for example, cats or rats or plants from islands where they are threatening native species. Then there's captive breeding. There's a lot of captive breeding of threatened species in zoos. Zoos do a lot for conservation. There's reintroduction, like the Crested Ibis in Japan. Sometimes it's bringing species back to where they were before, sometimes from the captive animals in zoos. And then there's control of pollution, chemicals getting into the water or the air. These are all actions that are taken partly by government and partly by civil society, by conservation organizations to save species. There are also actions that are taken internationally. So you get international agreements to prevent the trade in certain threatened species, like there is currently an international agreement to prevent the trade of rhinoceros horn, for example. So these are just the many, many actions that are taken. And the key thing is to take the right action for the species you're working on. Now, your second part of the question was, what can young people do? It's a very, very important question. First of all, I think it's really important for young people to spread the message. Young people are very active on social media, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And it'd be so helpful if more young people are promoting the need to save threatened species using social media. Young people are much better at this than adults. And so they know how to use these social media, and they can set up campaigns, they can raise awareness, and they can push the adults to do more. Young people can also help find conservation projects where they live. Obviously, when you're young, you can't go to another country very easily and work on conservation there. But you can work on conservation where you live. In your local neighborhood, you could find a project. Is there a local reserve? Or is there a new project that needs to be started? If you live on the coast, can you collect the plastic off the beach? Because plastic is very damaging to marine species. Can you organize your school friends once a week to remove the plastic? Can you encourage the adults to join you? These are the sorts of things you can do. And can you get your friends interested? If you're interested, can you spread the word to your friends? Can you get people to join conservation organizations? And then there may be possibilities to study conservation in school, maybe in your biology class or geography class, or you could take courses online or through books. You can learn a lot, you can inform yourself. There's a lot of information online. And so don't wait. Make yourself an expert now. You can do it. It's a very difficult question. I would like to think that the pandemic will make us more respectful of each other, to realize that our behavior does not just affect ourselves, but it affects other people. So if you or I go outside and we don't have the face mask, we are not wearing this, right? If we go outside and we're not just, and we behave badly, we get too close to people, we are not just risking ourselves, we're risking others, especially vulnerable people, people with illness or people who are old. So I hope the coronavirus will make us more respectful of others. I hope it will make us aware that what happens in one country can spread to another country. We have to work together. And I hope it will make us respectful of science, because certainly, I think less in Japan, but certainly in the Western world, we have seen in recent years more criticism of science, people saying scientists are elite people who make decisions hard to understand. But when we have a crisis like COVID-19, coronavirus, who do we turn to for help? We turn to the scientists, right? Who's going to make the vaccine? It's the scientists. Who's going to make the better treatments? It's the scientists. Who tells us how to behave so we reduce the risk of the disease? It is the scientists. So let's get away from this anti-science. Let us realize that we need science to make this world a better place. We need more than science. It's not just science. We need good ethics. We need to treat everyone with respect. But let's embrace science. It's a great gift to us, science. And to the young people, I say, if you're interested in science and if you have scientific skills at school, that is a good thing. And see if you can use those as you grow up. I think there could be, but I think we have to do it intentionally. It won't just happen. We have to make it intentional. In my answer to the previous question, I pointed out how the coronavirus shows us that the world is interconnected. We can't have a disease in China and keep it there. We live in a connected world. It will spread through the whole world to every country, right? And so we have to work together. And so I think more humility, more willingness to help, less nationalism, more working together, trying to remove the suspicion between us. But I think there's another thing. I think coronavirus has also shown us what is important in life. So for many decades now, in a lot of the world, the thing that we have been most interested in is getting richer, more money. And for many people, that's important because there's a lot of poverty in the world, and those people deserve to be richer. But in the end, it's not wealth that brings you happiness. It's not wealth that brings you joy. It's things like nature, beauty, love, relationships, wild animals, wild plants. This is what brings us joy. This gives us a spiritual dimension in life. This is how many people find God. This is how many people find meaning. And this is what's important. And I think the pandemic has shown a lot of people, especially if they've been locked in their houses for months on end, or if they haven't been able to go into shops, but they have been able to go outside into nature, they start to realize that it is the beauty, it is the relationships, it is the love, it is the feelings that matter the most. And so I hope that this pandemic will prove to be a moment in which we in the world realize that we were on a mad, crazy race for money and riches and material possessions. And in doing so, we'd forgotten what really matters, and we had forgotten the real values. So I hope that will happen, but we will have to do that intentionally. And I think, again, the young people can play a critical role in leading the way. So to all the young people who are going to listen to this, I guess my message to you is, first of all, to have hope. If you look at all the data, and you do need to look at the data, you'll see the world is getting worse. The nature and the ecosystem and the climate, it is all getting worse. You'll see that. But we can do something about it, and especially you can do something about it, because you're the next generation. So I encourage you to work together, not as individuals, but as community, working together as a group to be the drivers of change, to tell the people in power, people of my age, we've had enough. We don't want to be going down the route that got us into this mess. We want to have a world that, that has the beauty, the nature, and the interest that our children and our children's children want to enjoy. So I encourage you all to be bold, to have hope, and when you disagree with others, disagree well. Don't end up like we see so many politicians doing today, saying terrible things to each other. When you disagree, disagree respectfully and work to solutions, and treat everybody else as human beings, not as enemies or things like that. Set a better example than our generation has done. You can do it.